Greetings, greetings. This is Body-Culinary, and I'm sending you all some warm, positive vibrations. Today, what we're going to be exploring is it possible and how might we be able to neutralize the tendency to eat, to consume mindlessly, not being present to what we are eating on automatic pilot, eating mindlessly, as well as identifying, and is it possible to slow down to be present enough to check out and see why and to neutralize why we are eating, consuming things that we have identified, that we know in our quiet moments with no audience by ourselves, substances, things masquerading as food that we know will rob us and suck up and perhaps destroy our vitality, our energy, our youth, our skin, our teeth, compromise a healthy weight, which is so important. There are a lot of these things that we actually intellectually know. So the question and what we are going to explore is it possible and how might I be able to neutralize this tendency, this mindless, often compulsive behavior? So I am Body Culinary, personal trainer, professional chef, mother, natural born woman. Shout out to you, whatever your expression is. And I love to encourage what I will call peaceful consumption. Now, you'll have to find your sweet spot of whatever that looks like for you. What that looks like for me is a consumption pattern centered around food or energy consumption that loves me back, that is going to give me a return on my investment for shopping, preparation, planting, watering, weeding, that I'm going to get much more back than just the flavor and the party in my mouth. I'm looking to nourish myself and even soothe myself at a cellular level so that my body has what it needs to deal with stress. And that's a spectrum of stress. The amounts go up and down in life. But I do know that I deplete different types of vitamins, for example, B vitamins, when my body is experiencing stress. We all do. And stress, even though we know this intellectually, it's been said over and over in the media. There have been numerous studies done on the effects of stress on the physical body, on the brain, on how it creates plaque inside of the arteries, clogging the arteries. This is a physiological response to stress. Even our bodies being and our brains being subjected to fright and fear has a physiological effect on the body, and habits can be wired like a record groove into our minds, and quite often we are habitually looping thoughts and fright and fear without really being aware or present to it, and we're responding. One of the ways that we respond in ways that this is expressed is in our style or our pattern, our consumption pattern is quite often where this shows up. And this is quite often manifested, a symptom of this particular pattern of mindless eating or eating substances that we know compromises our health. Some of the results are excess adipose, the technical term for fatty tissue on the body, in particular midsection. Women, we have a tendency to store excess fatty tissue, unhealthy fatty tissue. There's a certain amount of fat that all of our bodies have and need. However, I'm referring to unhealthful adipose tissue that in women is usually stored around the midsection in the back of the arms and in the thighs and the glutes, and in our breasts. So I just want to just make note that many of us quite often are approaching this from an aesthetic point of view or from our ego, our presentation, what we look like. I invite you to consider to go deeper because as someone that's worked and has competed in fitness and worked in the fitness industry as a personal trainer and a coach for many years, as I've noticed the majority of people do not sustain or maintain. And those people that manage to make lifelong changes, there are some distinct patterns. And one of them is our why and our approach, our perspective. So, for example, if we are thinking of getting fit to fit into a wedding dress, quite often that's one event and it's not sustainable. So, that frame of thinking is not enough to sustain a big enough why, a big enough drive to maintain these new habits that initially are uncomfortable, right? To get into shape, reshape the body, to cultivate muscle tone, which comes from work, safe work, put onto the body temple and the muscles and the limbs. Just fitting into a dress is usually not enough to sustain us. Those folks that do take on making changes that are not in a life threatening position, there's usually a shift that is happening, and there is a pattern, and it is something that we can cultivate for ourselves. So, one of the biggest tools, and there's several tools that we can enact in our lives, is awareness, and it's something that we can cultivate in awareness, which I would say is a distinction from just trying to do something, which can often feel like a struggle. And withdrawal is something that feels very, very challenging when we're trying to do something. However, there is a pattern, there is a shift, and the awareness, which we can cultivate, will go a long way in actually getting us more excited and clear around our goals. It can really help catapult us in getting into action around what we say is valuable to us, right? What's important to us. And one of the things that most of us say is important is health and vitality and play. However, it would appear that there's some cognitive dissonance, there's a blind spot, there's a disconnect when it comes to pleasure and self soothing and eating healthy and appropriate amounts for our body temple, and eating and consuming uh, fuel that nourishes us primarily for health reasons, not primarily for self soothing and comfort. Isn't that interesting? So we're going to explore this today. So something in this, you can look this up on your own, that I'd like you to consider is fear. Fear. And there are 6 basic fears. I've mentioned them before, but I will list them here. So usually I can forget one, but today I'm going to list the 6 basic human fears. Some people say 5, some people say there are more, but I can identify that there are 6 primal fears. So here they are: fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love of someone or never finding love, fear of old age, and fear of death. Again, let me list those again: fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love of someone, fear of old age, and fear of death. Now, isn't this interesting? And just contemplating and thinking about these things, is it possible that we can be manipulated to purchase products based on these fears? Because fears are primal. And the interesting thing about fear is, although we may have several degrees and be highly accomplished in our chosen careers, fear overrides logic. It overrides everything that we know intellectually. And the body is wired for survival. Different types of chemicals, adrenaline. There are different chemicals in the body that kick into fight or flight, and it overrides human logic. And this is necessary in order for us to get out of harm's way, or perhaps to cope in a situation where we cannot escape the physical stress or abuse being put upon us. We're wired for survival. Again, I want to emphasize that this supersedes logic. And this is very important to note so that we don't spend so much time beating up on ourselves. One more time. I invite you to, and if anything here doesn't resonate, you're welcome to leave it right here if it doesn't resonate with you. I invite you to get quiet and to consider fear and the emotion. What does it feel like? Of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health. What does that bring up for you? What kind of pictures? Likely, these are very triggering things. Fear of loss of love or never finding love, fear of old age, and fear of death. So, our primal fears of survival or loneliness or um, physical pain kicks in. It overrides all logic. And then I will also note that when we have emotional pain, and this is something I picked up on the pattern as a young person before I can articulate it, coming from a very religious family, I noticed that the religion didn't seem to be enough of a tool to help folks manage the intangibles, the things that you can't see with your eyes, emotional pain. I noticed that folks prayed and, you know, lots of prayer warriors in my family and, gospel and stomping and shouting, that felt good. However, it seemed like when that wore off on Sunday, that throughout the rest of the week, that the patterns of behavior, not the story, the patterns that I observed in terms of substance abuse and eating to the point of deforming our body temples, causing them to be misshapen and compromising our health. Type 2 diabetes, we know, is a disease of lifestyle and is a result of our consumption patterns. I noticed that this tendency to self medication, religion didn't seem to be enough of a tool to neutralize this. So, this really peeled my eyes and got my curiosity to ask questions. What is the blind spot? What is the comprehension that is missing? What's the tool that's missing? And how come the adults around me don't know about it? So, it really set me on a path of curiosity and questions and research and investing and educating myself over the years. So, can we neutralize eating mindlessly? I would say yes, although I don't think it's an overnight thing. Awareness, right? Because many of us are looking for a quick fix or a pill. And quite often, with the quick fix, we are wanting to bypass any kind of feeling bad or we perceive as feeling bad or feeling emotions or what could come up. We've also been, it's very common for us to think that only professionals, and I'm not a professional psychotherapist and I don't administer education. However, intuitively, I have faith and trust in myself that I can find tools to nurture and care for myself. I've always been known that eating healthy shouldn't have to be cost prohibitive and expensive, as well as caring for myself, even if I didn't see the behaviors modeled in terms of self care. So it set me on a journey. And in taking on 110% responsibility for myself, I invested in myself. I've experimented. I've purchased books and tapes and taken workshops and been willing to buy foods that were expensive, or that tasted good or didn't taste so good, or take bitters to find and be willing to invest to find my sweet spot. That's been one example of taking on 110% responsibility so that I can feel empowered about changing my trajectory. So I do think it is possible if we are willing to hold space and be with ourselves through the process and understand sometimes foods will be bitter. There are some things like seaweeds and brown rice that I used to eat that I thought was I thought was gross, but I was willing to try different things on for size and to invest in learning how to prepare foods in ways that were attractive to me and to manipulate the textures and the flavors and the presentation of food because I knew I was in this for the long haul, right? That I needed to do this to deposit into the 401k of my body, that I want it to be with me as pain free as possible and as pliable and movable as possible. And for my body temple to serve me into my more seasoned years. So it is possible with some education and some awareness, to cultivate awareness and some application and trying on for size and some quiet, to neutralize, to be able to be objective around our patterns and to perhaps not remove the old experiences, but perhaps to be able to interject another narrative and another frame of reference for why we do what we do when we do it. And uh, what we're doing, is it really serving us? And the beautiful thing is to take comfort in knowing that we can find foods and habits that nurture us, foods that are actually delicious, where it's not a diet, that is sustainable and manageable and affordable. And we can have so many treats that we don't need to cheat, that we actually have something to look forward to. So I think it's very, very important. Pleasure is an important part of life, but it doesn't have to be at the expense of our health and our vitality. I think it is possible, as someone that has been a junk food junkie, to find things to look forward to, that are almost like on a level 10, not almost, that are on a level 10 in terms of visual appeal and aroma and scent. Consumption and consuming food or energy is I find it a very sensual experience. So, and it's no wonder that we consume particular types of foods when we are triggered emotionally. One of my mentors and teachers said to me, as someone that had a lot of acne, it was so frustrating. Oh my gosh, and the hyperpigmentation, it was embarrassing. Someone that was very fit and worked at a holistic health center, to have so much acne and with white stuff coming out of it. It was so bad. It was so bad. And I remember one of my mentors said to me, "You are under heavy manners." And I did not want to hear that. That was actually irritating. She said, "You should give thanks for the acne, because some folks' bodies are not even responding anymore, in the sense that they may be deadened or had shut down, and your body is still giving you a response to what it is that you're eating." So that was a quite an enlightening perspective, even though I didn't want to hear it. And also to know and to get clear that I couldn't do what everybody else was doing, because I obviously was getting a different result. So I would have to not I made a choice to not go along with all of the groupthink, although many times I did. And I got consistent results with my skin and with my stomach and with my weight. So I made a decision to do something different. And what that looked like for me, traveling in the airline industry, always carrying my own food. I also get that from Grandma Lou, right? Who was big on eat your own food. So I've been big on making it a very pleasant and pleasurable experience for me. All of this is possible to cultivate a lifestyle and a way of consuming that you enjoy thoroughly, and where you can relax around food and not have to be so preoccupied with it. However, this is a process. So if you could perhaps just hold space for yourself like a friend and just be with yourself. So, in the fears that we identified, fear of poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love of someone, old age, and death, there are some things that we can identify, and we can bring them into our awareness around our energy or food consumption. So let's look at these fears, right? What can we do with these fears? Being that it's primal, it overrides our logic. So what we can do is, and you can find some of this online, and just have my own approach specifically when it comes to food, but a very simple, not needing any kind of religion, perhaps some quiet and some good food, but some things that we can do with ourselves to heighten our awareness and slowing down and thinking about, is to identify some of these fears. So then we can start to create awareness and start to see how these fears come through the back door. And these fears, although it doesn't seem to make sense, but we can actually be bringing to us with our actions the very things that we don't want. I call it the back door. the backdoor mentality. So, for example, we can identify the fear, we can acknowledge the fear, and we can accept that fear is a signal to get ready for something. So, that's one of the simple processes you can find online around reverse engineering your fear. However, let's apply this and explore this in relation to our consumption patterns. So, let's say poverty. Poverty, I think, is a great example. How, and I wondered this as a child, how is it that you can be in poverty yet be overweight? Right? I never understood it, but I knew that there was something there. So let's say poverty, a fear for your security, or that there will be a lack of resources or a lack of food. How is it that we could be overweight with the fear of poverty, or if we are short or limited on resources? Well, if we explore the principle of the backdoor, I like to call it the backdoor mentality, in a fear for resources, what do? We eat like we're not going to get another meal, like there will not be another opportunity for us to enjoy this treat or this food. So we'll eat several portions as if it's not going to come around again. So that would also put on our radar that we're not relaxed, right? There's a lot of anxiety, there's looped fears. So we can't relax and just enjoy the meal, enjoy, be present, enjoy it immensely, and get up from the table when we're satiated and just walk away, even if we never had the meal again. So there's anxiety, right? And anxiety, and usually that type of irritation, usually if you're irritated, we will likely have to calm and to soothe ourselves. In addition, and poverty, you can find throughout the states and different parts of the world where there are food, quote unquote, deserts, where there's not access to a lot of good quality food. And perhaps there's a lot of access to junk food or chips. I used to be a potato chip and candy addict. It is easy to rationalize 25 cents for a bag of chips. However, at some point I could recognize I could eat one bag of chips, another bag of chips, another bag of chips. Four of them was $1. And it became an expensive habit. And at some point I realized, as I sat with myself and became more observant over the years, that I couldn't get full. I was just loving taking the bag and licking all the flavoring and the barbecue flavoring, because barbecue potato chips was my thing, out of the bag. And I kept getting bigger bags of chips that over time had less and less inside of the bag, which I thought was a scam. But I never got full. And so, in sitting and holding space for myself and cultivating awareness, over time I became aware that it's not food. As much as I loved and enjoyed the flavor, I recognized it is not food. And so, epiphany, eureka, no wonder I'm not getting full, because it's not food. At some point, I realized that, okay, this is a chip, a slice off of something, a deep oil fried chip, but it's not the whole potato. And I realized a whole potato, which would fill me up, was less expensive than the chip. Now, this may seem overly simple. This was a huge epiphany and started to shift my paradigm, my awareness, my knowledge base, or my common sense, my critical thinking, my discernment around what I was putting into my body. I also realized, like Grandma Lou said, eat your own food. The potato had to be prepared. And the whole potato can get cold. I preferred it warm. It was a whole food. It had more weight to it, one potato, than all of the bag, even 8 bags of chips. So at some point, I mourned the loss, and I would say mourn the loss of many foods also along the path of, as I learned about what different portions were appropriate portions in working in health and fitness competitions. I thought, you have to be kidding me. This is all the rice that I get? This is how much calories even in the whole foods is there? Now, I did notice a big distinction in terms of um, the weight and the volume, which equates and is relative to satiety or being satiated and feeling a sense of fullness, and the amount of nutrients in it. I could see a big distinction in chew factor, more satisfying chew factor in the chips and the potato. Big difference. Isn't it amazing that this basic education and this basic discernment and critical thinking isn't encouraged in school. It's not encouraged in school in a day and time where mothers and families are moving at such a pace to pay to afford a cost of living, that the convenience foods, many of the things we're eating, the chips for convenience, we're not present to the full cost of what it is that we're losing, right? Or part of the experience that's missing, even from preparing our own food. We may not be considering that part of the feeling of satiation that is missing is coming from interacting with others, interacting with ourselves, being, in that sense, being very quiet as we are ingesting this offering to the body and this energy, being very calm as we're eating so that we can digest food rather than being running around anxious from one corner to the next with the food in our hand, or being in a state of fright and fear as we are chewing and ingesting food. So, if we come back again to poverty, this is just one example of how a state of poverty, a state of anxiety, a fear for of resources can actually have us come through the back door to eat much more than we would need out of fear, out of fear. Also, you could also apply this to the fear of ill health. Now, this would seem not to make any sense. Why would I eat something unhealthy um, as a treat? Doesn't make any sense. So the fear, and this is a great example of how something that we fear, we could actually, in our focus on it, be drawing to us exactly what it is that we don't want. So we're so scared of ill health. This could perhaps manifest, well, if I'm going to die, I might as well eat this right now. And many of us may not want to acknowledge that we're not fully logical creatures. There's research that confirms that most of our behavior, our waking behavior, is driven by the subconscious. We are quite often triggered, what I will call a state of triggeration. So, what are some things that we can do again to neutralize the fear? And this is not something that is just at an intellectual level. I invite you to make use of the early morning hours and quiet time. That's a time where we can cultivate awareness. It's not all the time in the noise. There's a lot to be said for cultivating quiet in terms of allowing our mental chatter or our patterns of thinking and processing and thinking and reasoning to come to the surface, and quiet. The volume of the external noise can uh, be turned down, and you can actually start to become present, or to actually hear your thoughts and hear how they go on and on and on and don't seem to slow down. This is also a space where your movement practice can also provide this space for you to get quiet internally. So identifying the fear, right? And we can relate this to food. Identifying perhaps a fear of poverty or a fear of criticism about our weight or our skin can make us have more nervous chatter and start to eat more. The fear of loss of love, or feeling very lonely and depressed, we can use the food as a boyfriend or girlfriend, or as company, or as ways, almost like a cigarette, to mitigate stress. So you see, it's coming through the back door. So the quiet can give us access to process our thinking and reasoning, why we're doing what it is that we're doing. So identifying the fear, which can be poverty, ill health. It might be any or all of these different things, or death. Looking at all the different fright and fear being put out at us on the screens has us focused on eating too calm to soothe ourselves. So identifying the fear, acknowledging there is a fear there without shaming ourselves and making ourselves bad or wrong. Accepting that the fear is a signal to get prepared for something. Now, I really like this one, that I didn't make up, but however, my own interpretation on it is identifying this fear is giving us some kind of information. It's telling us perhaps there's something that we can do to mitigate the fear or be prepared if something is on the radar. That something can come up for us. There are different things that we can do when fear comes up to soothe ourselves. Or let's say, for example, if we're afraid of ill health, what we can do is start to engage in a movement practice, engage in a garden for therapeutic reasons, to also calm ourselves on a regular basis. This goes a long, long, long way in improving our immune system and even our quality of life. Again, it's something that we have access to, or that we can gain access to. So we can also get confident about what we can do. So there's certain things, let's say I don't have a gym membership, but I can cultivate a movement practice in my home. That is something I can do, even if it's 20 minutes, half an hour, and I can get stronger slowly over time. So we can get confident there is something that I can do. There is access to YouTube videos. There are things that I can invest in if I don't know how to do it. I can invest in education to learn how to exercise, how to prepare food, how to combine properly, how I can prepare my food so that I can be satiated. So we can get confident about what it is that we can do, what we have access to. I can carry my food with me in spill-proof containers. Next, we can get certain that we will overcome the fear. And how would I would like to frame this is just making a decision. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I can definitely tell you I've made a decision that even if things happen outside of my control, I have made a decision that I will take 110% responsibility for my health, because I don't like suffering. I don't want to take needles or insulin. And so I would always say that I'm a work in progress. However, I think it's absolutely amazing that I'm not addicted to those potato chips, even the health junk from the health food store. And it has been an investment. It has been very, very intentional. It's not about me being lucky. It's about me being very intentional and investing in my education, trying on different foods for size, investing in uh, going to culinary school and shopping for different types of ingredients. It has been very, very intentional. So, in making a decision, it all starts with a decision, and then going on your scavenger hunt to find ways to educate yourself with different skills and trying things on for size. Just like you would practice in other areas, this is also, I would say, a very practical spiritual practice, because we are um, nurturing this house that holds our essence, our spirit, while we have this human suit. And so next is um, getting excited and taking action. Now, this is huge. I'd like to frame this as checking in with how you feel. Your feelings and your emotions give you a lot of clues. So, for example, when it comes time, there are times where you can be dreading your movement practice or exercise, depending on how you're framing it in your mind. There are times where I'm so looking forward to dancing or moving or getting sweaty, and or I'm looking forward to the feeling that I have, even if it's challenging, how I know I will feel after I have really exerted myself. That is a reward. So I'm getting excited about transformation, and I can navigate that. I can cultivate that excitement by the images I have around me, the images that right now I have on my screensaver, in my planner, pictures I've put up. I've created mirrors and murals of beautiful women in shape at all different ages. I did that at a young age. So I can get excited, get myself excited, definitely by the music I'm listening to neutralize what I like to call stinking thinking. I can get excited and get into action. There's nothing like immediate action towards a goal, doing something, one push up, walking one time around the block. Just get started. That's usually the most challenging part. Something else, another part, in order to mitigate or to look at fear, look at it squarely and face it, right? This psychological response is perhaps to sit down and journal. Um, what could happen? What's the worst that, this fear? Identify, get it out of your mind and put it on paper so you can look at it objectively. What could go wrong with my health, or, with whatever it is that I'm fearing, that is showing up in my consumption patterns, my eating patterns. More than likely it's showing up in other areas as well. So we can identify it and make it very objective by putting it on paper. Next, we can ask, what can I do? And you can journal with this and use this exercise to journal. What can I do to prevent this? So, in terms of the ill health, I can get into a movement practice. I can learn about portions. It doesn't mean you have to count calories forever. However, that is definitely an area where most people avoid learning how much fuel is appropriate for their hour tank. That's important so you can cut the guesswork. You can cut the guesswork out, as well as engaging accountability tools, whether that is a coach or if you have a coach that recommends. I often recommend different types of accountability tools, right? And initially, you may need that education just so you can have an awareness. So at some point, you don't have to count calories. You just have an awareness. Whatever your food choices are, you want to see how much fuel is appropriate for my body, and am I actually um, burning off this fuel? And so, what could go wrong? What can I do to prevent it? And then finally, what can I do to recover should this thing that I fear happen? Worst case scenario, if I got really sick, would I be doing anything differently? That's something I've also asked my sisters. Is there anything in my lifestyle I would be doing differently if I had a diagnosis? Is there anything that I should be doing now that I should be getting into action, doing now around my health? And so your journal is a wonderful opportunity to explore these things. So this is doing a lot of the mental work, right? Because our behavior is being driven by our thoughts and our fears, and it is showing up inside of our consumption patterns and our eating patterns. So I hope you have found this helpful. I invite you to consider feeding yourself and your cells and your mood and your vitality the most beautiful, colorful, water rich, nutrient dense, fiber filled fuel, fuel full of electricity and life force. Whatever the best of that is available to gift your body temple with this divine Porsche car. Gift it and take care of it, because you won't get another one. And prevention is so much more pleasant, and it's so much better than cure, right? So wherever you are on your journey, I invite you to be patient and to hold space for yourself, to be unapologetic about enlisting support for yourself. Support is huge in my toolbox. It's huge. And I am unapologetic about creating support for myself and what I'm listening to. If you don't have anyone around you that is committed to their health or to their fitness, find some friends and some tools and some things you can use to be unapologetically supportive of yourself. If you have questions for me, feel free to reach out to me, info@body-culinary.com for one-on-one coaching. Let me know how you are doing on your journey. So that being said, we will connect soon. Create a great day on purpose, just because you said so. Oh, before I forget, do avail yourself of the tool, Whole Living Foods in the Hood, with menus to fit your budget. That is a guide. It's not a recipe book. It is more so a guide with pictures of the food, whole, fresh, living, unprocessed foods that I have been eating for years. The label that you call yourself is not so important as the results. Usually, if we start to fill up on more fresh, whole, living, unprocessed foods, satiety or being satiated will show up. So all the questions that people can come up with or ask me, along with pictures and budgets and ideas of how to prepare the food, are inside of that guide. So you're welcome to avail yourself of that tool, as well as if there's anybody that is dealing with a lot of hyperpigmentation and acne, you can find Natural Beauty, no products, only food. That is how I healed my skin, by primarily putting the whole, fresh, unprocessed foods in at a cellular level. And it's also about what you leave out, right? So we're not just paying for expensive cleanses and foods and then neutralizing that with a lot of the non-foods and the substances masquerading as food, putting that into our system. So those tools are available for you on body-culinary.com. You're welcome to join me for movement in the early mornings, Monday through Thursday. It's one of the best things that I do for myself. And so you can get some education around working around injuries, corrective exercise, and also cutting the guesswork in terms of how much you need to actually elicit the types of changes that you want to see in your body, and keeping your body tempo around for the long haul, as pain free as possible, as vital as possible, so that it can serve you into your more seasoned years. So that is available for you on body-coloring.com. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I'd love to hear how your journey is going. All right. So that being said, create a great day on purpose.